The Renaissance, right? That golden age of art, science, and humanism where everyone was suddenly enlightened and cultured? Well, hold on to your berets, because it wasn't all Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci sipping espresso and debating philosophy. Let's peel back the layers of this so-called enlightened era and see what was really going on. First off, hygiene. You think the Dark Ages were smelly? The Renaissance wasn't exactly a bath fest either. People believed bathing too often could make you sick. Yes, you heard that right. They thought water could seep into your pores and bring in diseases. So instead of a nice hot shower, they opted for a quick wipe with a cloth and a hearty splash of perfume. Imagine the aroma at a Renaissance fair. Probably not as pleasant as the paintings suggest. They might have been painting masterpieces, but they were doing it with a distinct lack of deodorant. It's a wonder they could focus on their art with all that ambiance wafting around. Picture this: a genius sculptor chiseling away at marble, surrounded by a cloud of scent that could knock out a horse. Romantic? Maybe not. And speaking of health, Renaissance medicine was a wild ride. Doctors were still into bloodletting and leeches. Imagine going to the doctor with a headache and leaving with a leech on your forehead. Not exactly the pinnacle of medical enlightenment. They also believed in the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, and thought illness was caused by an imbalance. Feeling down? They'd prescribe a good old-fashioned purging. It's like they were trying to invent the worst spa day ever. Relax, we'll just drain some blood and give you a nice vomit-inducing concoction. You'll feel better in no time. Meanwhile, the patient's sitting there thinking, I'd rather take my chances with the headache. These were the same folks who'd look at a plague and say, maybe it's the bad air. Spoiler, it wasn't. Politically, the Renaissance was a hot mess. It was the era of Machiavelli, who basically wrote the handbook on how to be a sneaky, power-hungry ruler. His book, The Prince, is the ultimate guide to political manipulation. Think of it as the 16th century version of a shady self-help book. So while artists were painting masterpieces, politicians were plotting betrayals and assassinations. Not exactly the harmonious utopia we imagine. It was more like Game of Thrones, with better fashion. And let's not forget the constant wars between city-states in Italy. Florence, Venice, Milan, they were all vying for power, and it wasn't pretty. There were battles, sieges, and a lot of backstabbing, both figuratively and literally. You'd have dukes and princes smiling at each other over dinner, then slipping poison into the wine by dessert. Enlightenment? More like endarkenment with extra steps. Even the art had its quirks. Sure, there were stunning paintings, but some of them were commissioned by the church or wealthy patrons to show off their power. It was like the original Instagram flex. Look at me, I can afford a Botticelli. Art was less about expression and more about status. Artists were often at the mercy of their patrons, who could be fickle and demanding. Imagine trying to be creative while your boss is breathing down your neck, saying, make sure to include my dog in the painting and make me look taller. The artist over here muttering, fine, but your dog's ugly and you're still short. So next time you admire a Renaissance painting, remember it might have been the 16th century version of a humble brag, a way to say, I'm rich and important, without actually saying it. And let's not forget the social inequalities. Women were still largely excluded from education and public life. The Renaissance might have been a rebirth for some, but for many, it was just another day in the patriarchy. Women were expected to be obedient wives or virtuous nuns. If you were a woman with ambitions beyond that, good luck. You might end up like Artemisia Gentileschi, a brilliant painter who had to overcome immense obstacles, including a highly publicized rape trial, to make her mark. Her story is both inspiring and a stark reminder of the era's limitations. Imagine being her, with all that talent, and the best career advice you get is, marry well, or join a convent. Meanwhile, the men are out there pontificating about humanism and freedom. Ironic, isn't it? But wait, there's more. The Renaissance was also a time of intense religious conflict. The Reformation was kicking off, and it wasn't all peaceful debates. There were wars, inquisitions, and a lot of people getting burned at the stake. The Catholic Church was fighting to maintain its power, and anyone who dared to question it could find themselves in hot water. sometimes literally. So much for enlightenment. It was more like, agree with us or else. You'd have priests preaching about salvation while secretly hoping the heretics next door would just disappear. Tolerance? Not really a Renaissance strong suit. And let's talk about science. While there were certainly advancements, like Copernicus proposing that the Earth revolves around the sun, many of these ideas were met with fierce resistance. Galileo, for example, was put under house arrest for supporting heliocentrism. So even as knowledge was expanding, there was a lot of pushback from those who preferred the status quo. It's like trying to introduce a new idea at a family dinner. Someone's bound to get upset. The Earth moves? Nonsense. Pass the potatoes. The Renaissance might have laid the groundwork for modern science, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. More like a bumpy ride with a few detours through Crazy Town. Now, don't get me wrong. The Renaissance did bring incredible advancements in art, science, and thought. We got the printing press, which revolutionized the spread of information. Suddenly, books weren't just for the elite. We got perspective in art, which made paintings look more realistic and less like flat, awkward family portraits. We got the beginnings of modern science and the questioning of old dogmas. But it was also a time of contradictions, where brilliance and barbarism coexisted. It's like that friend who's super smart but always forgets their wallet. Impressive, but flawed. You admire them, but you're also a little annoyed. So was the Renaissance enlightened? In some ways, absolutely. But it was also a messy, smelly, politically chaotic time, with a lot of room for improvement. It was a period of great potential, but also great pitfalls. You had geniuses creating timeless works next to leaders starting pointless wars. You had thinkers pushing boundaries, while others clung to superstition. Next time someone waxes poetic about the glory of the Renaissance, you can nod knowingly and say, sure, but have you heard about the Leeches? It's the kind of comeback that shuts down the nostalgia real quick. And there you have it, the Renaissance. Not as enlightened as you think, but still pretty fascinating. It's a mixed bag of brilliance, blunders, and body odor. A time that gave us so much, yet left so much to be desired. Just maybe hold your nose while you study it. Because this golden age, it had a bit of a stench.